Alright, now that we've done some exercises with watercolor, we're going to move on to actually creating an image. And we're going to start again by using an object of your choice. I'm going back to my trusty drill. Now, you're going to want to lay in an outline, a rough draft layout using that 2H pencil because it stays very light, right? And you don't need to go into super detail with this because the idea is we're going to keep looking at the object as we paint to get the details. It's important to use that 2H though and go very light because we don't want the pencil coming through. Watercolor is a very transparent medium. That means we can see through it pretty easily. And really we're going to use layers of watercolor to build up the image. We don't want the pencil to dominate, so keep it light. If you need to, you can go back and erase as you keep going. Now, I've already done a layout for my drill. You're going to see that we're going to be working a little bit smaller than normal with a half size of paper. And the first thing with watercolor is it's easier to lay in a background than do the subject, as opposed to doing the subject and then coming back to do a background. And we want to do this in stages. All right? Watercolor is a lot of fun, but if you rush to do it, it's going to all mix together. You're going to end up with some really nasty colors, and you're not going to be able to tell what the object is. So we want to do it in parts and then let it dry. So I'm going to start with that background, and I'm going to just use a purple tone to lay it in. And the idea with watercolor is that it's a little bit of what I like to call controlled chaos. It can spread, it can go crazy, but there are ways that we can kind of manage and hold it in there. So remember, your first step, of course, is to get the air bubbles out of your brush. And then we're going to get that purple tone going. And I'm using a jar with a little bit of water in it, not crazy. This is kind of for my dirty water to get things started. And I'm adding a lot of water to the purple in the tray. Alright, now here's where the control part comes in. I'm going to go to my drawing, and I'm going to use the clean water, and normally I would use a bigger brush for this, to kind of put some areas in that are wet to begin with. And I'm going to go carefully near my object, my drill with that. And the idea is if I lay the water in, and as long as I don't go so crazy that it starts spilling out everywhere, I can control where my watercolor tone ends up without having to go super heavy with the color to begin with. And the reason we do that is because with watercolor, it's an additive medium. That means that I can keep adding color, but I can't take it away. Once it's on there, it's on there. There is no white in our watercolor tray. There is no bringing it back. If you put it on the paper, it's there. So I want to paint light. Because again, I'll build it up, I'll always add it in later. In a classic background, you could even be thinking about that technique that we did before with the gradiated wash. And in fact, I'm not going to go too crazy there. I want to get to my painting. So you can see that it's giving me a little variation, a little tone change. I can come back in, I can make the watercolor spread just by adding water to the paper. I'm alternating. What I'm trying to avoid is to go really heavy dark right out the gate. I can build this up with layers. It'll allow me to change and think about it. If I end up not liking a color, I can come back with another layer over the top and change it, provided I stay light with it. If I go really heavy with the watercolor, that's what I end up with. And I'm really using this watercolor just to define the shape of that drill. I'm trying not to brush too hard or too much, because what happens then is you start to roughen up the paper and you can damage the image that way. Plus, it's kind of fun to just let the watercolor do its own thing. It's alive, it'll move, it'll go all around on its own. I'm going to come back to the front side of the drill. I've got it on the slanted board again, because that way gravity will help pull down that tone like we did with the gradiated wash. And part of the fun of watercolor also is that you get that nice variety of tone. I'm getting a background that's got a lot of variation to it without even having to try very hard, simply because of the way the watercolor spreads and moves around. I'm not personally super interested in flat areas of color when it comes to the watercolor. I like variety. Alright, so I've laid in a very light tone just to kind of establish the colors. At this point, you can see I've got a reservoir at the bottom there. I can have fun, I can tilt back, let some watercolor go there. But I really want to stop, and I want this whole background area to dry now before I even attempt to paint anywhere else. Because if I go in and try and paint the drill, that purple's going to end up bleeding into the image and we're going to lose our clarity. So I'm going to set that off to the side. And this is why we're working half sizes. The beauty of watercolor is you really do want to be working on two paintings at once. That's why when one is drying, the other one you can be working on. So in this case, I've gone with a slightly different composition. I've decided to focus on just the top of the drill. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do some color mixing on the page. Alright, so again, I can have some fun just laying in the water. I want to be careful when I get close to the drill. You want to go right up to the edge without going into it, because that'll control where the watercolor goes. But if you don't go right up to the edge, you're going to end up with a weird white halo effect around the object. And again, I'm just starting this with some clean water. Feel free to experiment and have some fun. And what we're going to do this time is we're going to change our colors up. We're going to go for more of a red this time. Making sure that I'm, at this point, I have a water that's dedicated just to that. And again, we can just drop that tone in. Let it move around, let it exist. You can shoot down, it's okay, as long as you're scared not to be messy. I'm going to clean my brush out because now I'm going to come back in. I'm going to go yellow this time. I want to get a lot of color in there. And what I can do here now is this allows it to mix on the page. I got some areas that are going to be yellow. I got some areas that are going to be red still. I got some areas that are going to end up becoming that orange tone. Alright, and I'm going to just kind of keep messing with that, allowing the watercolor to be free to do things on its own, to kind of exist in its own little way. I'm going to allow for the happy accidents. And again, as long as I've laid down some water barriers, that is the clear water to start with, the watercolor is going to want to exist in those areas. It's less likely to shoot off into the object. So that's two different ways you can start working on the background for your object drawing using watercolor. It's time for you to try it. Good luck.